What is going on, everyone? Phil here and welcome to KO Gaming. Today I got something a little bit different for you because this past week I had the chance to participate unexpectedly in the For Honor closed multiplayer alpha. Now, for those of you who aren't aware, For Honor is a over-the-shoulder, third-person melee combat action-style game, which will be coming out in February of 2017 in most territories. This game is unique in the fact that, unlike most other third-person action games, it is all about old-school melee combat, using almost a rock-paper-scissors style gameplay aspect to determine who will hit who at what time. The game has multiple different modes, and I was very interested in this game. After seeing some gameplay of it at E3 for the past couple of years, it kind of left a big question mark. You know, how would this game perform? How exactly would it feel when you actually got your hands on it? Just from watching simple gameplay footage, it was actually hard to determine. So, I want to say special thanks to a viewer named Mackenzie of mine, and let me tell you, being a YouTuber certainly has its benefits because he got me an invite to this alpha. I had not planned on participating. I got a special invite in my email this week. I jumped on the opportunity, and the 3 hours that I played this alpha ended up being some of the most entertaining and fun stuff that I've done in quite a long time in gaming, so allow me to tell you what happened. First off, For Honor has some customization, which is cool because I had no idea that that was actually possible until I tried out this alpha. You get to make your own symbol, which is kind of awesome. It's like your own coat of arms or a family crest that maybe, you would see over the years in some of these medieval times, and it really does add some kind of a feeling of ownership when you create this symbol that's going to appear on all of your warriors during gameplay. There's 3 different classes of warrior. You've got the Vikings, the Knights, and the Samurai. Now, it's not known whether or not there'll be any further classes upon the retail release and or subsequent DLCs for this game, but at least for the alpha, it added to a lot of variety. The Viking seems to be a more kind of slow, steady, very strong, almost having like super armor property style warrior, but he's slower, so some quicker characters have the opportunity to maybe move quickly and dodge around him better than others. The Knight is more an all-around kind of character who kind of has strength and speed, and then the Samurai are very fast, but aren't superbly strong. Instead, they kind of rely more on counter-attacking and stepping around their opponents and using their environment to their advantage, rather than just straightforward brute strength. So there is some variety to the characters in the game, and the more that you play, you actually get in-game currency that allows you to select secondary characters for each class, meaning that there's actually 6 playable character types in this alpha, which is pretty darn good. Now, the alpha itself is multiplayer only. There is reported that there's going to be a full single-player campaign present in the game at retail release in February of next year, but none of that is present here in this alpha build. Instead, you get 3 different online gameplay modes. There's a 4 versus 4 mode where you control one of these hero-style characters, and you have to control 3 different territories on a map. It's 4 versus 4, so at any time you could end up being in a 2-on-1 situation, or you could find your team kind of teaming up on someone else, or it could just be an even duel. It kind of varies depending on how people plan out their strategy. Now, in the central capture point of each map, there are these little kind of almost like grunt soldiers that are always constantly vying for the battle. And it's funny because if those soldiers are allowed to basically overrun the area and your heroes don't go in there to clean them up, they can actually capture an area without anyone even really being there, which could be pretty much an annoyance. So it's fun. You got 2 little capture points where there's no grunts and you're just constantly fighting duels, trying to take them over and gain points, and then you've got the central capture point where there's pretty much always a giant battle going on because of the presence of these little grunt-like soldiers. Now, the way that it works is similar to domination in any other kind of online action game. You accumulate points per how many territories you actually control at one period of time. If you kill off all the enemies in that area and you stand there, then you capture the point, and then your team starts accumulating points. If someone of the other team shows up, then it becomes considered neutral, and no one gains points until there's a winner between that fight, and so on and so forth. Now, the unique thing about this is that once a team reaches 1,000 points, the other team's respawn will be disabled. Meaning, once 1,000 points are hit, the other team can't regenerate. Once they're dead, they're dead. They're not coming back. And it really adds to this kind of gameplay where now you can't just go gung-ho running forward. You got to be super careful. Maybe if you're down on energy, you got to try to run away rather than try to do an upfront fight because you know you can't respawn. And it was funny because there were a couple battles where both teams hit 1,000 points and then neither team could respawn, and it basically basically became a sudden death situation. This game mode is pretty interesting and pretty impressive for what they're trying to pull off. There are also 2-on-2 and 1-on-1 duel modes. These modes have nothing to do with capturing territories or fighting little grunts, but instead are just about the mano-a-mano combat between warriors. In a single duel, it's just that, 1 versus 1, you versus another human, and you use the combat engine in order to sort out who's the best. Now you might say, how does the combat engine work? Well, basically you've got 3 different ways to block: left, right, or up. You also have 3 different attacks: left, right, or up. So really it becomes kind of a rock, paper, scissors. If you're really fast, you can actually see where what direction their attack is coming from and reactionarily block what they're doing. In a lot of cases, however, you have to be quick, especially with some of the quicker characters like the samurai. It's a little bit harder to actually block their attacks, so maybe reactionary combat isn't always the best course of action. Now, there's also an attack called a stun, where you charge forward and strike the opponent with your shoulder. This breaks their guard, and now you have an opportunity for 2 follow-ups. You can either strike them with a melee attack for guaranteed damage because their guard is broken, or you can do a double stun, which pushes the opponent back and makes them lose their balance. The cool thing about this is that there are environmental deaths in the game. There are certain areas and positions on these maps where you can push someone through a hole, push them off the end of a bridge, leading to an instant kill. And there were actually a couple fights where I was losing desperately, but I landed a counter, and then I landed the unblockable, or the guard break attack into an unblockable push that pushed them right off the edge, and even though I was the one losing the duel, I ended up winning in the long run, which is pretty cool. If you're doing the 1-on-1 fights, after you win, you win. If you're doing the 2-on-2 fights, if you win your fight, here's the opportunity to rush over and try to get a 2-on-1 advantage against the remaining fighter from the opposite team. And it's actually interesting because some players didn't even wait. They would just turn tail and try to run to get that 2-on-1 advantage right away. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. It certainly seemed pretty interesting to me, and it's a unique style of gameplay that I really haven't seen in a long time, so it was very refreshing. The graphics of the For Honor Alpha were also pretty impressive. Even though they didn't run at a silky smooth 60 frames per second, they did stay relatively constant at around 30 frames, even with all the little grunts that were present during certain portions of the gameplay. I never found myself getting lost or basically getting thrown off by a choppy graphical performance. It seemed pretty consistent on the PlayStation 4, and I was pleasantly surprised by that. The sound and all of that sound pretty good for now. I like the orchestral soundtrack. It sounds a lot more like a calming style music than anything else. It didn't have any kind of, music that sounded out of place for a kind of an old style medieval combat game. It didn't, it wasn't jarring. It wasn't playing club music or anything. And that was well appreciated, because when you have music that fits the time period, it makes it feel a lot more authentic than if you had a bunch of crap playing in the background just to try to get the game hype, and I like that. So overall, the graphics, the sound, they're pretty good. I don't know if they're going to be any better or worse in the final version of the game, but they were pretty passable for the alpha. Also, there were 3 different maps that I played on the alpha, which were pretty neat. There was one where it was kind of snowing, there was one where it was just kind of an outdoor battle, and in one it was raining. So it seems like there will be kind of different environmental things going on during the course of the game that could lead to maybe different kinds of visibility and maybe different conditions. I'm not sure, but it definitely was awesome to see that they had that many maps when they really, for an alpha, they could have just put in one and said that's a day, but they actually put in a little bit more effort, and I appreciated it. In fact, the alpha was so good that the only real complaints I had was that a couple of the matches were a little bit on the laggier side, where a guy would try to swing and I would blatantly see he's coming from one direction, I'd try to block, and it just wouldn't respond in time, probably because of a delayed reaction because of the different kinds of ping that we had between each other. It was weird because a lot of the characters, their pings were blinking from red to yellow to green to red again on the matchmaking screen, and it actually made it a little bit confusing to tell if the match was going to be good or not, and really it didn't seem to matter what it said on that screen. Sometimes the matches were good, and sometimes they were bad. It was also a little annoying when sometimes players would drop from a match, leaving you to be teamed up with a bot, although it seemed kind of interesting because some bots seemed to be incredibly devastating with their strategies, while others just kind of stood there and took it on the chin. So maybe the bot AI will be improved or tweaked a little bit for the final version. I'm not really sure, but ultimately, overall, the experience was great, except for my very final match, in which the match said, oh, round 1 fight, but the opponent was already striking me after I came out of the load screen, leading to me to basically be dying instantly and having no way to fight back. Obviously, that's something going wrong with the matchmaking and the loading of the game there. Hopefully, this alpha will allow them to determine these kind of issues and solve them before the final retail game comes out in February. So ultimately, overall, I really enjoyed this For Honor Alpha experience. It was such a refreshing thing to not be playing a shooter, but instead having melee combat, different kinds of warriors with different strategies, a unique combat fighting engine of something that I've never really experienced before in a competitive style of game. The fact that the game's going to have multiple different game modes. The question here, of course, is going to be, will this warrant a full $60 purchase? Will the single-player campaign be meaty enough? Will there be enough versatility in the online mode for this to be a well-received release? Let me at least give you this much. If you looked at this game at the E3 press conferences of the past couple of years and you weren't sold, if this game has an open beta coming up, which undoubtedly I'm thinking it probably will, considering that they're already having an alpha, definitely check it out for yourself. This game blew me away. I had next to no interest in For Honor before I played the alpha. I went into it with no expectations whatsoever, and now I'm actually eagerly anticipating the release of this game next year, simply because it just seems so different from everything else. I mean, flying aerial executions and brutal beheadings and 2-on-1 combat, sneaky tactics with Vikings knocking you down and knocking you off ledges and being able to turn the tides of a battle that looked like there was no hope of winning. It's a pretty awesome feeling, and the fact that there aren't bullets flying everywhere like every other game this day and age made it feel so much different that I definitely enjoyed it, and I recommend that you check it out as well. For Honor's stacking up to be a great game. If anything, this alpha was a great indication of positive things to come early next year. Hopefully, my impressions are correct. Well, that is it for my impressions on the For Honor Alpha, everyone. I sure hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please spread the word about it. Let your friends know that KO Gaming is the place to come for all kinds of fun edited content that's not only reviews, but impressions, countdowns, and all other kinds of stuff, especially in the next few coming months with all the new releases that'll be coming out. I'll probably have something to say about the majority of them right here on this YouTube channel. Please check out the description of this video, where you can find a link to the raw gameplay of For Honor from my session last week, as well as some referral codes for a discount if you get a new subscription over at lootcrate.com, and of course for my Patreon. Thanks a lot everyone for watching. I'll see you next time right here on KO Gaming. Peace out.